On Friday, we asked you guys to consider your identity. Now, we are well aware that it's not easy work to think about who we are and think about where we kind of fit in and exactly who we are as a person. This work is going to be crucial for us to start to reconsider and think more deeply about the characters that we've been studying. When I started to think and reflect about my identity, here are a couple things that I came up with. I thought of myself as a teacher, a sister, a girl, a runner. I like the outdoors. I'm a daughter. I own up my own house. I live in the city. Some things I value were inclusion, lifelong learning, being kind to all. Now, all of these pieces of my identity make me exactly who I am, and a lot of the ways I act are shaped because of all of these pieces that fit together. Now, readers, we're going to do a bit of a deep dive, and let's start to talk about how our group identity shapes us personally as a reader. So let me think a little bit. How does my position as a girl affect the responses to the books you read? Well, I know, we've been working through Ghost Boys. As I was reading that story, there were some things that maybe I didn't understand. As a girl, I'm going to be honest, I didn't like to play with guns when I was growing up and toy guns. And those were things that I wasn't interested. So some of that I felt differently because of my identity. And so we can ask ourselves other questions. How would this change if I was a boy or if I was an elementary student and not a teacher? Maybe my perspective of Jerome and his friend playing with the gun, the toy gun, might have been different, and I might have just thought it was, hey, like this is what all the kids do and this is what we do for fun. So notice that my perspective changes based on my identity when I'm reading a book. My reaction might be different than the person's reaction next to me because of who they are and all of the pieces that make up their identity. Now, just like the groups you belong to shape how you see things, the groups that our characters also belong to shape their views. So let's start to talk about that. Before we consider Jerome in our book, we need to first talk about the word empathy. Empathy, many of you have heard of before, and let's clarify what we're going to talk about it with today. Empathy is being able to sense, identify with, and understand what another person is feeling. Today, I'm going to ask that you guys start to find your empathy as we start to better understand our character and how they are dealing with all of the different things that are going on in their book. So let's think about Ghost Boys. I want you to start by specifically reflecting on our character, Jerome. What groups does Jerome belong to? Think about who he is and all of his different interests and places he belongs. As you guys thought about that, it was time for you to consider the groups that Jerome belongs to. Maybe you thought of some ideas like I did. He's a boy, he's a student, he's a brother, a son, he's a protector, especially of his sister, he's a friend, he's African American. These are just a few of the pieces that make up the identity of Jerome, and maybe you notice a few of these things, or you even thought of a couple of your own. Now that we've considered these different pieces, let's think more about that. Because society expects people to follow certain ways, we begin to make specific judgments about Jerome. In fact, Jerome might be treated differently than we would treat others, and Jerome actually might see the world differently than we do. He might think sometimes the world is unkind and unfair. And readers, you might be thinking, okay, Miss Hermson, he totally is seeing that. We're seeing a prime example of how Jerome is seeing how the world can be unkind and unfair because he can't do the same things that other boys his age can. This is why he's treated the way he's treated when he's playing with the toy gun. Think about that experience and how his identity shaped what ended up happening and his experience to him. Readers, today we started to think about how the character's identity shapes their experiences and how they're treated. I think specifically about how Sarah was initially thinking about the whole situation and reflecting on everything that had happened with Jerome. Her identity was different, and her identity helped her to see the perspective of what happened in one way. As you're reading your social club books, I want you to spend some time thinking about your character. A great thing to jot down as you're reading on your stop and jots would be pieces of your character's identity that you're noticing. And as you're doing that, think about how your character's identity is shaping your character's experiences. You're going to have an easier time empathizing with your character now that you better understand yourself and what your groups your character belongs to. Grab your social issues book club and get reading. Don't forget, jot down those different groups and pieces that make up your character's identity as you go today.